A very good evening, friends. So, I hope you're all doing safe and healthy. Well, in this particular month, I have been talking in terms of India's 8, and today in this video, we're going to talk of can the company change accounting policy? Well, the answer is yes. But are there any parameters within which the changes in accounting policy needs to be done? Yes. Well, there are two parameters which are given in Index 8 which elaborates that what are the circumstances when a change in the accounting policy can be done. Let's I think find this out in detail that which are the two parameters when a company can change an accounting policy. कुछ बच्चे कहते हैं सर आप हमें क्लास लाइव पढ़ाएंगे लेकिन हम तो सर लेट नाइट स्टडी करते हैं तो हम लाइव क्लास में सुबह सुबह नहीं आ पाते सर हमारे यहाँ पर इंटरनेट की बफरिंग भी बहुत होती है तो सर कुछ ऐसा करो ना जिससे हम क्लास अपने पेस पर देख सकें तो आप सबके लिए एक बहुत बढ़िया सोल्यूशन आ गया है यदि आप अपने सीए फाइनल एग्जामिनेशन की तैयारी कर रहे हैं तो अगर आप अन अकेडमी की आइकॉनिक सब्सक्रिप्शन परचेज करते हैं तो आपको इसके अंदर मिलेंगे एचडी क्वालिटी के अंदर किए गए स्टूडियो रिकॉर्डेड कंटेंट। आप उसे अपने पेज पर देखिए, उन वीडियोस को डाउनलोड कीजिए और अनलिमिटेड व्यूज हैं, कोई आपके लिमिटेशंस नहीं है व्यू पर। बिल्कुल स्ट्रक्चर्ड इंडेक्सिंग आपको करी गई है कि आप एक एक चैप्टर को एक स्ट्रक्चर्ड मैनर के अंदर देख सकते हैं। फास्ट ट्रैक कोर्सेज हैं जो आप अपने पेस पर जब चाहें जिस स्पीड पर चाहें आप आराम से देखिए। क्लासेस के लिंक्स आपको गूगल ड्राइव के अंदर मिल जाएंगे and you can see the classes without any buffering at your own pace at your home convenience in HD quality। बढ़िया जी। इसके लिए आप आइकॉनिक सब्सक्रिप्शन अगर लेते हैं तो ये सब आपको बेनिफिट्स मिलेंगे एब्सोल्युटली इंक्लूडेड इन द डील। इसके लिए हमें सर करना क्या होगा, डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स के अंदर आपको लिंक मिलेगा फॉर आइकॉनिक सब्सक्रिप्शंस। आप उस लिंक को सब्सक्राइब कीजिए, साथ में मेरा कोड इस्तेमाल कीजिए CAKB10। आइए लेट्स क्रैक इट। Para number 14 of Index 8 tells us the parameters under which a company, an entity I would rather say, shall change an accounting policy. It very clearly says an entity shall change an accounting policy only if the change is meeting the clause A or the clause number B. Now, the clause A says that it is required by Index. Let's take an example. For example, we know that quite recently, as far as leases are concerned, there was Index 17, which said that the lessee used to classify the lease as an operating or a finance lease. And if it was a finance lease, the asset and liability used to be reflected in the books of accounts. But if it was an operating lease, then nothing used to appear in the balance sheet, except that we used to take a lease rent expense in the income statement on a straight line basis. Index 17 was withdrawn and then Index 1116 came into account, and which very clearly said that all the leases by the lessee is going to be treated as a finance lease, except there were two exceptions, which is either it's a short-term lease or it's a low-valued asset. But bearing the two exceptions, you can say that all the leases were treated as a finance lease, which means what? The company had certain leases where they treated them as operating lease. The asset and liability was not in the balance sheet, but now you want to come to a finance lease and you want to recognize the asset or liability. So is this a change in accounting policy? Yes, it is supposed to be, a case where the asset and liability not recognized earlier is going to be recognized in the books of accounts. So in this particular case, we would say that it is required by an Index. So the company would have to, on a mandatory basis, account for a change in the accounting policy. Now, I'm not saying that once this is a change, it's going to be covered under Index 8. The accounting of such changes would be given as a part of the transition provisions, which is given in Index 116. The second clause, which says in para number 14, is that it results in the financial statements providing reliable and more relevant information about the effects of transactions, other events or conditions on the entity's financial position, financial performance, or cash flow. Well, I would say in clause number B, the company would typically, compare what is the industry practice and what is the company following in terms of accounting policy. Now, let's say, for example, the industry is measuring, let's say, the investments, and they are measuring the investment in subsidiaries, associate, and JV, let's say using a cost model. Because Index 27 allows that if you've got investments in related parties, you could measure them at cost. But let's say the company in question is considering the investments at a fair value, which is also allowed as per Index 27. So the accounting policy followed by the industry in terms of accounting for these investments is using a cost model. But the company in question is applying what we are saying is a fair value model. So the company feels that it wants to change the accounting policy, move from a fair value to a cost model. And it could be also, let's say, in a PPE. Why only investments? It would happen in terms of PPE as well. The industry is following a cost model, the company is following a revaluation model. Now, in these cases, the ultimate objective of making financial statements is that it enhances the comparability. The comparability of the entity over a period of time with its own financial statements, and also comparing the financial statements with the industry at large. So if I feel that changing this accounting policy would result in a more relevant and reliable information because the comparability of the financial statements will increase, then that becomes another reason of considering a change in accounting policy. But this is the only two areas where a company can change an accounting policy. So either it is triggered because of a requirement in Ind AS, or it is triggered because the company feels that it wants to align in accordance with the industry practices and they want to make their financial statements more comparable in nature. Then it triggers the concept of changing the accounting policy. This is an exhaustive list of parameters. That's all in this particular video. Wait for some more interesting inputs coming on the changes in accounting policies in the coming videos. Thank you for watching. Bye bye and take care.